to say that for the CXPA organization. And I hope my sound is coming across all right. We did some testing. My name is Yvonne Nomizu, and I'm Managing Director at Pacific Consulting Group. And I'm so pleased to be able to moderate this panel on a topic that we hear a lot about. So as one of the CX experts, it often comes up, how do you make a business case for customer experience management? So before we jump into that, let me just remind everyone about CX Day. This is the third annual Customer Experience Day, and as most of you know, it occurs on the first Tuesday of October every year, and it really is a worldwide global celebration, testament to the people on this phone call and the number of other webinars that are going to happen around the world over the next 24 hours. So we're going to kick off CXPA Day with this Asia Pacific region panel, and I will do an introduction to the three speakers, and then we'll launch into part one, and then have some time for Q&A, and then launch into part two and have some time for Q&A. So we're going to try to manage this right to the 30 minutes. If you would like more information about CX Day, you can go to www.cxday.org. And of course, cxpa.org is the mothership portal for all the information about the association. So we encourage you to take a look at that, share with your coworkers and your friends, and help us celebrate the day. So let me get started with some introductions. We have three members of the panel today, and I'll follow the screen right here, starting with Harm Ellens. He is a consultant in the customer experience transformation business with Optus Business, which is a telecommunications company. And he has many years of experience in the IT and the IT services, and we'll be very interested to hear from him about what does it take to get actual customer experience transformation going. Second, we have Kim Ronaldson, who joined us from Sydney, Australia, and she is currently Manager of Customer Experience at Hello Real Estate. And I have learned recently that Hello Real Estate is like a startup company that's trying to do some breakthroughs in the residential real estate area, promoting self-service and single fees and a very interesting business model. So we'll be good to hear about how she's thinking about customer experience across all her different stakeholders. And then welcome to Andrew Wheatley, who is the Director of Global Communications and Public Affairs with Janssen Pharmaceutical, one of the more significant subsidiaries of J&J. And Andrew is focusing now on communications and public affairs, but has come from some positions that have CX in the title, namely as Customer Engagement Manager and as Customer Experience Lead, moving the Janssen organization into a customer-centric operating model. So welcome, everyone. Let's get started with kind of diving into a business case. And when I think about a business case, you think about selling someone or selling an organization, right, to get their commitment. And, what you really want are the resources, the mind share, the funds, the capital, and the, C-suite making a priority of something. And we do hear a lot of people in the voice of the customer business or customer experience managers inside companies always ask that question, how do I make a case for it? And I think the real question at hand is, how do you do the business case in a compelling way that gets a customer experience initiative started, but also keeps it going in a sustainable way? And I think what we see often enough is an easier time getting approval to do voice of the customer. So let's measure, let's hear from customers, let's do customer insight. But really, as we all know, if you're going to achieve customer experience excellence, you need to go beyond that. You need to not just measure, but you need to do something. You need to do customer experience design. You need to do employee training. You need to get people in front of the customers, and you need to really get the whole organization, on board. And so that's what I would call the full, sort of whole body commitment to customer experience. And I think in that case, the business case is a little bit more difficult, and it's a little bit more elusive. So why don't I open by asking Andrew, I'll start with you. You were leading a customer experience effort at Janssen, and as we understand it, you were trying to get the whole business model oriented around being customer-focused, and you had put in place some building blocks, digital, CRM, voice of the customer, net promoter score, and kind of building up to create this customer experience transformation. So let me ask you, if you thought about making the business case at Janssen, what was involved? What did it take? What was it that convinced the C-suite? Was it hardcore numbers? And if so, what kind of numbers?
Great, thank you. And really excited to be able to share some of the learnings that we had from the Australian transformation as we made our organisation more customer-focused. And I think it's really good to look at how these evolve over time. So where we started in Australia was really just with the sort of fundamental building blocks. When I took on the role, initially was the CRM had just been introduced. We were just looking at launching a new CRM platform. And simultaneously, those of you that are familiar with sort of the pharmaceutical business model might know that that's been changing over time. So over time, our customer base has changed, and we'd sort of had this realization as a business that we needed to be more in touch with our customers. So my initial mandate was to look at the CRM and get a bit of an understanding of what does this changing customer base look like. But then, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, it's more than just these building blocks. It's how it all fits together. So some of the key turning points for us were, one, we had to build the business case with data. So we had to really understand what were some of the key metrics that the marketing teams were looking for, that our financial teams were looking for, and work out how we could get them very quickly and very early. And so in some ways, we initially looked at ourselves really as like a startup within the larger Johnson & Johnson group, and looking at how can we trial things like NPS to look at the results to show that there was a correlation. And the other lucky point sort of for us in that respect is our broader European organisation had gone through a similar transformation about 3 years prior to the Australian business starting to look at it. And so we were able to take some of the learnings from there, which obviously didn't apply wholeheartedly, but take some of them and apply them in making our business case in Australia. We also found it was another key element was working with organisations like CXPA and really looking at how we could bring in case studies and best practices from outside the organisation and introduce them to our senior executives so they could see where has this worked in other companies. In Australia, you're really lucky. You've got companies like Qantas, companies like Optus. We actually did some work with some of the team at Optus and looking at what had worked for them and how can we apply it in the pharmaceutical industry.
So, Andrew, if I asked you the question why, so you're saying you're given a charter, what was the end benefit or outcome you think that people were going for when they asked you to take this on?
Yeah, ultimately, as I said, initially there was a much part of it was CRM, but it evolved very, very quickly into this broader understanding of really identifying who were our customers. And for the first time, if you think about the pharmaceuticals industry, it's not really one that you'd equate with having a customer experience. And so we saw it as a way that we could really look to differentiate ourselves within the market and really form a much stronger relationship with our broader customer base, not just with clinicians who are our sort of traditional customers, but with patients, with policymakers, with payers, with healthcare providers, that much broader customer set, building a strong relationship by delivering an experience that could be defined as the Janssen experience.
Great. So that sounds very related to brand and reputation and relationship, and ultimately, do you think that helped drive kind of customer stickiness? Maybe not retention per se, but interest in listening to what Janssen had to say and what you had to offer?
Yeah, so one of the programs that we did put in place was, as we mentioned, sort of the NPS, but it was a much broader piece of research as well. And through there, we were able to identify some very strong correlations between the customer experience and the softer metrics and the harder business metrics and numbers as well. So we make some direct links, which obviously helped a lot in forming our business case.
Okay, there you go. I think when you hear that, that's a little bit where we listen for where the rubber meets the road. So can you link customer experience, quote, soft metrics to hardcore numbers, whether that be revenue, cost, and basically those are the two things that drive the P&L. You can talk about balance sheet issues such as brand equity, which I know J&J actually has valued their brand on their balance sheets. But that, I think, a lot of people would have greatly appreciated, understanding those links.
Yeah, and I think the one sort of the mantras that we've had as a team, and I was always reinforcing this with our group, was that we've been given a mandate, we've been given budget, we've been given resources, and we had to justify every day our existence. Like, we had to show to the business that the money and the trust that they're investing in us was worth it. And so that's where the whole way through we need to link everything to a solid business outcome.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, Harm, one of the things that we do often hear about, I don't know if you are dealing with this at Optus, which seems to me a very large entity with a lot of different groups underneath it, retail business, wholesale business. Do you feel like you'll need to make a business case kind of tailored to different audiences? So functionally, a CFO might really care about, the balance sheet, whereas a head of marketing is measured themselves on, customer acquisition or customer retention. So what about this issue of different stakeholders who have different agendas, and how do you make a case to them?
So we were very lucky, as Andrew alluded to. We were trailblazers in this space in our retail, in our consumer business quite some years ago, and we learned a lot of lessons. And one of the lessons we learned was that if you diversify too much at the early decision-making process, it becomes much harder to bring people back later on. So what we have is a very strong alignment and a strong mandate from senior executives on a focus on voice of the customer and NPS. And further sort of down the line, that does get recognition that certain businesses have individual business drivers, and we measure NPS in a slightly different ways, maybe specialized according to touch point or according to line of business. But at the very high level, the mandate top down is that there is a single measurement that we are all held accountable to. For example, NPS is one element in everyone's individual performance evaluation at the end of the year, including commission and bonuses. So we do take an approach that is sort of identical across the Optus business. The enterprise business, we do have a slightly different approach in the consumer space, given that the type of services that we deliver there are different, and we have a retail shop network that again is different from what we have in our enterprise business. But across the board, there's a strong drive to what we call the ambition to become the most loved brand in our market, and that is the banner under which we drive our customer experience efforts in both the enterprise space and the retail customer space.
Okay, great. I mean, what we're hearing is there's a certain element of across the enterprise, unifying theme, unifying metric, and then there's some tailoring as you do some more distinct voices.
As you operationalize it.
Excellent. Okay. Kim, we've been talking about sort of the link to ultimate business, hardcore metrics, financial metrics. As you sort of think of your job and going forward and making sure that your CEO is 100% on board and reflecting CX and the decisions he and his team make. What are the business benefits that you emphasize? And are they things like revenue and cost, or are they other things?
Hi, Yvonne. Thanks very much. I think at Hello Real Estate, we're sort of marketing ourselves as the new Uber of real estate in Australia. And so for us, it's a case of really focusing really hard on our client experience. And one of the things and one of the challenges that I've had is I don't like to talk about customer service. I like to talk about customer experience. And so, yes, we have metrics and we have key benefits. We have a number of stakeholders across our business in various forms and shapes. And as we're sort of categorized as a startup, I guess finances are one of the key things that our stakeholders are looking at. But at Hello, I've been fortunate in that I've directed customer experience as being the key thing that's going to be the differentiator in our market. And so I do have the backing of the CEO and the shareholders. How we deliver that has to be cost effective. It has to be monitored. It has to be quite transparent and open. For us, though, one of the things is authenticity in what we're building. We're building relationships. The key point and differentiator for our business model is to build relationships and to view those relationships as being something that will end up on the balance sheet. We will be able to make a profit out of it, but it's not the focus right now. The focus right now is on developing strong stakeholders who understand that the client experience and customer experience is where we're going to be taking this business. And so I've been very fortunate in that, having joined Hello Real Estate, I take a very operational role as well. I think that's the key difference for us, is that I'm not just sitting on the outside as a customer experience manager, but I actually have a very operational role. I'm very similar, looking at the CRM, looking at the suppliers, the service providers, making sure that they also have the same values and ethos and behaviours as what we're trying to build in our business. And it's about integrity, openness, honesty. And those things, no, they don't have a dollar value at the back of them, but they will. And I think if you have a board and you have a CEO who understands it and they're willing to spend, it certainly does make the job a lot easier for us.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting. I've worked at some startups, and what strikes me is, how do you get started? Your company was actually built from the start on the premise that customer experience is going to help you be differentiated in the marketplace, and make it sound like it's part of the identity of what the business is about. So
absolutely,
that's no business case needed, almost, in that respect. Although it sounds like you're very disciplined about making sure that people see the benefits and you hit your milestones.
I think we have to be, because we're accountable to some fairly large shareholders. Hello Real Estate are about to launch on the Australian Stock Exchange. They'll be the first real estate agent to do so in Australia. That will happen in December. A lot of people have put a lot of value and trust in the business model. So we have to be very accountable to that business model. And I certainly am looking at it and saying, from a customer experience point of view, that's the building block, but at the end of the day, our shareholders are going to want to see the benefit of that.
Yep, good, very good. I'm going to pause here and ask for some questions. So I think GoToMeetingWise, people can use their panel in the questions section to write in some questions, and I'll be able to see them right away. So please, go ahead and send anything in. And if we don't get any right now, we'll just keep going. So while I'm looking for those questions on the board, Harm, you had mentioned, linking into performance metrics. And I got the sense that all managers, all employees had some kind of metric that they were accountable for. Is that the primary way that you will kind of sustain the focus on CX going forward? Or, one of the premises of this webinar was you have to continuously be making a business case, that you got to compile evidence, you're always trying to make the case. And on the other hand, I've heard of companies where it's just becomes embedded in the culture, as if, Kim's company grew and it's just the way they do business. It's the way USAA does business. Everybody's trained that way, and it just becomes almost a cultural phenomenon. So where are you at Optus in terms of feeling like you need to kind of prove it over and over again?
I think we have both of that in our organisation. We're a well-established organisation, been in business for more than 25 years, and for those that joined the organisation a long time ago, they had to become accustomed to customer-centric thinking and the measurements that go with that. Others, like myself, joined the organisation in recognition of the fact that it does do some very special things around customer experience and wanted to be part of that. So for me, it's part of my professional DNA, and there are many others that have joined the organisation for the same reason, which is great credit to the transformational efforts that have been achieved so far. But we are continuously evolving our approach to internal communication, which is the key driver. So we have regular staff NPS as well as regular what we call touchpoint NPS, which is directly with the customer. And then we also measure ourselves in comparison to the rest of the market. So we do sort of what you would call traditional customer satisfaction surveys still, once or twice a year, to make sure that we understand how we perform in relation to the rest of our market. And so there's a two-pronged approach. There's one element of the business that needs to be continued to convince that it's worthwhile expending all of this effort, and there's another part of the business that sort of has internalized the whole customer experience mantra. And of course, there's plenty of research out there that does prove the benefits, and we frequently refer to the experiences of others as an example as to why you want to do this, because especially when you start off early, the proof takes a little while to accumulate that it is the results.
So in the end, you said you used case studies or examples, but which ones resonate the most? So for example, when I was a brand manager, I asked for money for my marketing plan, and the next year, if I did not show an increase in market share, well, it was harder to get money the next year. So it was pretty clear that I, was asking for spend and that I had to deliver some results. And from that point on, you had some credibility and you could keep going. So what in the end was, if you really were to cut through the chase, what is the case study that resonates the most in terms of how it affects the company? Is it revenue?
It is revenue. Well, revenue is something that takes a little while to prove that you are accumulating that. In our instance, in the case of Optus in the consumer business, it was really the general sentiment that we got out of our regular customer satisfaction surveys around bill shock, the unexpectedly large bill, and the costs that were associated with managing that dissatisfaction in our customer base. So that was one of the key drivers for our business. So if you are working in a heavily regulated environment and the cost of compliance goes up, we use that as the lever to turn the organisation around and stem sort of that flow of cost that went into having to justify ourselves to the ombudsman.
Yes, that's not the first time I've heard that, where after a while things become self-sustaining, but just to kind of kickstart something, you actually focus less on the long-term vision and perhaps more on something that is a source of pain. So it might be customer loss. It might be the cost of customer management or customer service. And as long as we get customer experience better, we wouldn't have as many calls coming in with complaints. Or as you say, sort of just the overall cost of customer management. And sometimes, I don't know if you guys see this, that speaks louder than anything, at least at the beginning. And then people understand the value of getting rid of the challenges and obstacles, and then perhaps switch over into aspiring to be the best. So I think there's different contexts and different ways to approach it. Andrew, when you were in the role, did you have sort of a sense of what mattered in terms of business outcomes at the beginning of your role as a CX leader, and did it ultimately come true, or did things shift? I mean, what's your 2020 kind of perspective on on the business case and the business outcomes?
Yeah, things shifted over time, and I think to your earlier point around, you've got to get some wins on the board very early with those short-term metrics and actually showing that change. But then over time, like the big realization for us as a company was realistically getting the customer experience right is in our DNA, and it's something that we needed to own and really grab onto. Like as a company, we always talk about the patient, putting the patient first in everything we do. Because it's ultimately the patients are waiting for treatments. And when we stopped and thought about it, realistically, talking about the patient like that, they're the customer, and it's all about creating the customer experience for them. And so once we made that link, then it became really quite a part of the fabric of our business. And then we could start to look to that longer-term view of truly creating a differentiated customer experience that was unlike what any of our competitors might have been doing. And that went beyond those short-term metrics.
Good. I think that's, and we've been talking about business case, but sometimes that just deep empathy that people have for the end customer, seeing the customer as a person, seeing them as a patient, seeing them as a homeowner that wants to sell, that is sometimes what moves people, even at the senior level. And because, as you say, Harm, sometimes the actual results take a little while to come. So you got to get people on board with something that they believe in, like whether it's brand or sort of your ultimate mission. So Kim, as you look forward and your company is going to go public, I don't know what you think about in terms of milestones that you feel you need to achieve now that you have literally shareholders that you might be accountable to or who are looking. You have your business owners, you have your actual end customers, you've got your internal. How do you kind of manage the different constituencies and sort of sustain this going forward?
Great question, Yvonne. And I think from my perspective, looking back on my 20-odd years in customer experience, it's setting those metrics now and building it into the DNA of the business, recruiting the right people who have a customer experience head on them, who are passionate about customer experience, making sure that everyone has a metric that is visible and open to the business, right down from the individual all the way across to top level. Very similar to what Harm has done as well at Optus. And then ensuring that we have those kickstarters on a yearly basis that show that what the customer experience is doing for the business is actually beneficial for the business. At the end of the day, at Hello Real Estate, it's all about our customers. And so they're the be-all and the end-all, but it's about being authentic with it as well. It's about being transparent and authentic and making sure that we say what we do and we do what we say.
Excellent. So we have just another minute. I'm just going to do a quick roundtable with all three of you, if you could speak for a half a minute each on if you were to give advice to a fellow CXPA professional, kind of starting out, has a lot of passion for this, but it's maybe not as advanced as you three are in terms of it being built into the DNA, in terms of having some results to point to and Kickstarters and so on. What is your piece of advice you would give a CX colleague in terms of making a case for this and sort of catalyzing a CX transformation? I'll start with you, Andrew.
I think my answer to that comes back to one of the underlying discussions around this being like from a financial viewpoint, and that is bring your financial partners along the journey with you from day one. It's customer experience and things like NPS have given a harder metric to what is traditionally a very soft area around marketing, and allows you to have a different level of conversation with the financial partners in your business, and that got us a very long way early on. Having strong relationships with finance.
Very good. Great point. And Harm?
Survey as much as possible across as many channels as possible so you can articulate the benefits and the pain at the same time.
Wow, very nice. Beautiful. And Kim?
Totally agree with Harm. Survey. Understand your customer and walk the journey with them.
Very nice. Thank you. I often talk to CX professionals about being trilingual. So you speak the language of customer, but at some point you might need to speak the language of the CFO in finance. And Kim, you say you're deep into the operations, and Harm and Andrew, you are deeply embedded, and you need to speak the language of operations as well. And I think armed with all that data, you sort of frame it just right for everyone and get that embedded. So I think it's our time. So I want to thank you, all three of you, Kim and Harm and Andrew, for this webinar, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.